Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, That Time the Bully Got Bitten in the Butt. I, female, 33 at the time, once had a run-in with a blatant bully. My family owns a business. We come from a lower middle-class neighborhood and kept close contact after we moved. Jane, female 93, was in her 70s at the time, was our old D neighborhood friend. She was an office worker all her life. She was one of the forever dwellers in our neighborhood. I had a specially close bond with her. Not anymore. Jane worked 40 years at a factory, and then got a job at another manufacturing company after retirement. She got laid off, so she found a job at a dentist's office. Dr. Jake owned 3 dental offices, so he depended on his employees to keep things running while he wasn't around. Jane worked for him for about 5 years. Jane and the other workers, all females, formed some sort of a clique. They loved her, because she was their elderly pal. I would visit Jane on some Saturday afternoons, bring pizza or lasagna and enjoy how the day ended in my old stomping grounds. It's just like in the good old days. I left my old neighborhood when I was 16, but I still cherish it. She always talked about her work friends, and sometimes they picked her up for an outing or they would carpool to the supermarket. There was this friend in particular, Nancy, female 60s. She was the one who seemed most friendly with Jane. I'd like to add that I never, ever had a conversation with any of these women, much less any type of a fight. As their relationship progressed, Jane volunteered lots of info about Nancy's life. She was more or less a lonely female who loved to gossip and was involved in a relationship with a married man, Ed. Male now maybe 43. Whose wife worked as a receptionist about 3 minutes away from the dental practice. Jane said Nancy was crazy, because she liked to stalk her lover's wife and gave him money often, help with a loan monthly payment, help pay for his car, buy him food so that he would come visit, give him $100 here, $80 there, etc. Their friend group was tight, so much that Jane would call them to clock her in. They would do this for each other all the time. My friend who also knew Jane kept telling me the office always seemed empty, except for the days when the doctor showed up. Jane suddenly lost her job. My mom took her in when our secretary got sick. My mom kept Jane in even after our secretary came back in for years. It was all good. Jane maintained the friendship with Nancy and the girls. Because we worked closely, I heard Jane tells lots of gossip about Nancy's private life. This seemed odd. Also, she had fits whenever Nancy called her. She would say, "Oh my gosh, again? So needy." This usually took place, Nancy's insistent calling on lunch breaks, whenever she heard something about Ed's married life. She was devastated to learn his wife was pregnant again, or that he bought the wife a new car, etc. For those wondering, I grew up with Jane having a place in my life, just like an aunt. Jane would usually wait on the sidewalk because Nancy would come to pick her up after work so that they could eat dinner together after work. So, basically, I was very loyal and very die-hard. Nancy would sometimes wave goodbye at us, but nothing more. There were rumors that the dental office may close down. No shit. Patients must have been switching doctors because office hours were erratic. The remaining days when the doctor was not, it was supposed to be used for scheduling, which wasn't happening. Jane said, she never indulged in this, just saw them do it. Jane's job was simple. Never had anything to do with money. She was with us most of the time on the computer, simple as that. Beatrice, our secretary, came to me one day and said she had something to share. She was very worried because of Jane's closeness to our family. Beatrice said she had caught Jane persistently going to our cash box and counting the money. When Jane saw her, she said she had permission to guard the petty cash. Until then, we never had any reason to distrust Jane. Beatrice said she was coming forward because she was scared something might happen and wanted to make sure her name was clear. We were shocked and baffled. It seemed ridiculous, but we still changed the box location. Again, it happened. We set up cameras and caught her counting the money about twice a day. She was caught taking bills, crushing them in her fist, and stashing them in her chest on 3 occasions during the same week. We never paid attention because our business is based mostly on electronic transactions, so the cash is left for buying stuff and other small purchases. So, in a week, she took about $350. This is the price you pay for not having control over each dime. We just left our petty cash lie in a box. We will never know how much she took. We confronted her with the video. She got mad at us and left the job. Obviously, she told everyone her own version. My mother and I were so astonished it took us months to assimilate. I'm talking about a woman who was invited to 500% of family events and was handsomely paid at work. We moved on as usual. Some old neighbors would occasionally tell us that Jane complained she was fired for no reason. Beatrice was yelled at the mall by one of Jane's friends because she was the thief but had Jane scapegoated. About 3 years later, my mom went to eat at a seafood restaurant. She's very hardworking and never takes me time. She went to eat but told me she ran into Nancy, who was sitting nearby with some other women. Jane wasn't there. So Nancy bullied my mom, who was sitting by herself. She cracked jokes, wouldn't stop walking by her table and saying things under her breath. Nancy clicked, mean girl, mode and cracked jokes. Then, they stood up kind of surrounding her. My mom was intimidated, so she just paid and left. Mom said Nancy yelled something like, "Hey, can't take the heat?" Mom tried to conceal her feelings, but I know she was hurt. Nobody should have to go through this. I was upset, but Mom begged me to leave it at that. Okay. I was paying for my stuff at a local mom and pop's pharmacy I visit quite often. The pharmacy is on the same street as Nancy's job, our business pretty close to everything. For this reason, it's like the first choice to buy anything. So I was there on a Sunday morning, which I really like because the street is empty. I was talking to a friend on my earphones. I'm first in line, already paying, but I heard strange sounds from the line. Because this isn't a Walgreens or big box retailer, the pay line is kind of less organized. I keep hearing laughter and a loud voice from the line, and the cashier begins to look uncomfortable. Because I'm on my headphones, I'm not 100% aware of what whoever is talking is saying. The cashier keeps looking at someone in the line, and the lady 2 spaces away from me says, "We don't need that." I saw Nancy pointing at me. Honestly, I was confused at first. So I tell my friend on the phone to hold on. Nancy is laughing at me, pointing at me. She's telling everyone, "Look, she's crazy," talking to herself. She knows damn right about the existence of earphones. She tries to rally the people on the line by cracking jokes and calling me a dumb witch. I took off my earphones. I was so angry my arm was tingling. I told Nancy I wasn't gonna do anything inside the pharmacy because I respect that place, but I know who she is and I'll wait for her outside. Her face changed. I gave her the option to repeat and tell me to my face the whole thing she said, did to my mom, since she feels so badass that she's messing with me. Nancy got quiet immediately. I got my shit and told her I would be outside. I waited outside and the witch never came out. So I hop of my car. 5 minutes later, she comes out. I think she thought I left. So I drove my car really slow next to her and told her to tell me what the duck she said. She kept walking. I yelled at her from my car, that she better open her mouth and talk. She didn't. Nancy went into a bakery nearby. She took a street, on foot, that had no entrance for me. No problem. Took the next entrance and parked at the bakery. I stood next to her and told her off. Then ordered some food for takeout. I warned her that if she ever saw my mom, or anyone in my family, she better cross the street. Oh, and please call your friend in my old neighborhood who put you up to this to see if she can come to help you now. Nancy just kept her head tilted to the side. I left. I called Nancy's boyfriend's wife and told her. I gave her all of Nancy's details and how to get to her house based on Jane's constant gossip. Basically, Nancy lived about 3 blocks away from her job, in front of an Adventist church. I told her Nancy's car information. I didn't call as a snitch, I called saying I was Nancy who suffered from rightful indignation. The woman hung up on me but took my next call again. I called the dentist at his other office. I said I was an inspector to get him to come personally on the phone. Once he did, I told him everything I knew but never gave my name. I called him lazy and incompetent to keep an office and hung up. I do know for a fact that the dentist fired everyone because he closed the office down. My friend who worked nearby said Nancy would stop by every now and then, but he avoided her because she was needy and he didn't want her to latch on to him. She told him her boyfriend dumped her for calling his wife, and said she was obsessive and irrational. I don't know much else. I never disclosed my involvement. I saw Nancy at the same pharmacy somewhere around 2015, more or less 10 years later. She's extremely thin and bent over. She didn't even see me and I just kept walking. I do see Jane maybe every now and then at the farmer's market, but I don't talk to her. We just act like we don't know each other. Next one is titled, Intentionally Unintentional Revenge on a Mailbox Vandal. This is my dad's revenge, not mine, and this happened last summer. My parents live out on a lake just outside of town. Their property extends to both sides of the road, and their mailbox is on the opposite side of the lake in the house. Over the 4 years they had lived at the property, a black SUV has knocked down their mailbox 6 times. They catch the vehicle on the security camera on the gate but get no identifying info. My dad would report it every time, but not much could be done. It was knocked over by a drunk driver once as well, but he crashed a bit further down the road, so that was the only time that my dad got reimbursed for the damage. Well, after the 7th time it was knocked down, he had had enough. The land on the opposite side of the road dropped off steeply immediately after the shoulder, so my dad contracted some guys to build out a small gravel pad, 15 feet long and 3 feet deep or so he could set his mailbox back from the road. My dad told me that if someone tried to knock it down now, they would regret it. Well, about 4 months after the work was complete, my parents were awoken to a loud crash in the middle of the night. They called the police and went out to investigate. They found the black SUV off the road and having crashed into a very large tree. The guy was taken to the hospital and was charged with a DUI from the crash as well as possession of drugs they found in the vehicle. By building out the gravel pad and moving the mailbox back by just a few feet, it still appeared that the mailbox was on the shoulder, and still seemed like an easy target. In reality, those 3 feet made all the difference. Because the pad was so short, the vandal left the roadway before the pad started, and when the right side of his vehicle went off the shoulder, his car went veering down the steep incline. The dude was pretty badly injured, and I know my dad felt bad about this. I think this was much more effective than he had in his mind. My dad isn't the kind of person to intentionally injure someone, so I am sure he was hoping to just cause damage to a vehicle and teach a lesson that way. Next one is titled, Another Mailbox Story. I posted this as a reply to someone else's mailbox story. I was informed that it should be its own post, so here it is, edited slightly for clarity. This didn't start out as a quest for vengeance. We just wanted mail delivery to our house. Vengeance came as a byproduct, but it was truly delightful nonetheless. So, mailbox story time. This happened back in 1982, for the record. My folks moved to a very rural area on a gravel road. No one had previously lived here, so it was a battle just getting mail delivery in the first place. My folks went several rounds with the local postmaster. He was somewhat enamored with his own power and very much a rules to the letter kind of guy. Every I must be dotted, every T crossed, and if there's so much as a semicolon out of place you'll have to start all over again. He seemed to have made it his personal mission to make getting mail delivery to a new address as difficult as humanly possible. Ultimately, my folks managed to fill out the paperwork to his satisfaction, and he begrudgingly allowed us to put up a box and receive mail delivery at our new home. Dad was extremely careful in the placement of our box and making absolutely certain as was the exact height, precise placement from the road, etc. to avoid annoying our local postmaster any more than we already had. There are, or at least were, very specific rules about rural mailboxes. Dad followed every single one. That first mailbox was perfect. The man who drove the road grader was as annoyed as the local postmaster, as he now had a new driveway to accommodate. We suspect that's why he had it out for our mailbox. After the road grader had demolished 3 of our mailboxes, Dad got pissed. Previously, he'd used the most basic design, just a post in the ground with a box on top. Now, he was motivated. Dad got a hold of a 9-foot-long section of metal pipe. It's 4 inches in diameter, outer measurement, and has 3/4 inch thick walls. I have no idea what this was originally intended for. But I know how Dad used it. He dug a hole 5.5 feet deep. He welded an upside-down tripod shape, think open umbrella, to the bottom of the pole and dropped it into the 6-foot-wide hole. Each welded-on leg was about 3 feet of some kind of rebar, and there were 5 such spokes. He then dropped some huge rocks on top of the tripod shape to hold it in place. The empty spaces around the huge rocks were filled in with gravel, and he dumped sand to fill in the air gaps. Then he filled the rest of the hold in with dirt and mounted the mailbox on top of the post. 3 days after Dad installed the new mailbox, we heard the road grader coming down the road. Our house is a 1/4 mile from the road, but we heard the loud clang from inside. We also heard the cursing and swearing from inside. No one went down to look until they heard the road grader drive away. When they did, the box itself was slightly dented on one side, but it was still firmly upright and functional. 3 weeks later, we received a bill from the township for a bent grader blade. It was accompanied by a letter informing us that we had caused damage to city property because our mailbox was installed incorrectly. It would need to be moved, and we were liable for a bill of a couple $1,000s worth of repairs. Here's where it becomes pro-revenge instead of petty. Recall the fact that the local postmaster was annoyed with us over our battle to get mail delivery? Mom had made a point of each time we reinstalled the mailbox, taking photographs down to the post office and having the local postmaster sign off approval of the height, placement, etc. She'd done the same with Dad's super post and had documented, signed approval of the box dated the day before the road grader had bent his blade trying to demolish the box. She submitted copies of the invoice for the grader blade, and the letter stating that the damage was our fault because our mailbox was incorrectly placed, to the post office. She also submitted copies of the official post office approval of the box to the township. The jerk of a postmaster was also quite prideful and became furious that his authority was being called into question by some podunk township. As far as he was concerned, the township wasn't questioning my parents, they were stating that his judgment was wrong. I don't know what went down between the postmaster and the township, but we received a second letter from the post office, reiterating their approval of our mailbox. We also got a formal apology from the township and noticed that the road grader's contract had been terminated because he'd lied about damage to city property. It was worded with a tone that said, "Please don't sue us because a contracted employee damaged your property." For the record, that post Dad installed nearly 40 years ago is still standing. We've replaced the box on top many times. That post, however, has now wrecked 2 cars and a truck in addition to that long ago road grader. Next one is titled, "Don't Flush." This is not my story, but the story of my friends. It happened several years ago. A and B were a couple, 2 great guys who were building a house together. One day A pranked B with one of those fake lottery tickets that were still a new thing back then. B fell for it big time and was really excited that $10,000 would go a long way to finishing the house. I felt bad when I saw the disappointment on his face when he learned that it was a joke. He got his revenge a couple of days later, though. I had a business in a small warehouse where he manufactured specialty stuff. He had 4 employees and it was a good business. Anyway, B let himself into the warehouse early one morning and turned off the water at the bathroom sink, the toilet, and the big sink. Then he left an official-looking letter on the front door from the water department advising that there would be crews working in the area that morning and that there may be interruptions in the water service. If there was a problem, they were advised to call the water department. I tried the sinks and toilet and saw that there was no water, so he told his staff to not use the toilet until the water was restored. Someone forgot and took a stinky dump only to find that it would not flush. Everyone was miserable that morning and there were no windows to open. When the water was not restored by lunchtime, I called the city and asked about it. He was told that there was no work being done in his area. That left him puzzled. He called B to vent about how frustrated everyone was, and in the middle of venting he suddenly realized that B had done something. It was an easy fix and we all laughed when we heard about it. Last one is titled, Another Driveway Situation. Background. We live in a large city, so we're lucky to have a driveway and luckier that it's big enough for us, one tenant car, and to rent off one space to a neighbor. We tried refusing his dollar, but he just won't budge. We're friendly and it's only one spot, but he's a stickler. Also, we move cars around for neighbors. If they're having company they will call and ask before they park, but the answer is almost always yes. Anyhow, the boyfriend of the teeny bopper across the street has been waiting for late night and parking in our driveway. But not just parking. Parking diagonal so no one can get in and out. One tenant gets home after overnight shift and is obviously irked. My husband tries to go to work 5 a.m., same thing. Guy stayed 12 a.m. till 9:30 a.m., after looking at neighbors' cameras for when he came. My revenge was that because I'm friendly in the neighborhood, I used our second car and two neighbors' cars, trucks to park horizontally across so he couldn't budge. Thinking he'd have to come ring the bell to get out and get a tongue lashing. Nope, dummy thought he could get out. I walked outside after watching him for 15 minutes try to maneuver his Jetta. Needless to say, he's kinda learned not to block or use our driveway, but he's still doing it to others on the street. Drives me bananas, especially when there are spots available on the street. Respect people and the spaces they've worked hard to earn and take care of, or get pranked back. He's lucky it was now and not 15 to 20 years ago. I was a lot angrier and reactionary then. Thanks for listening.